Hi everyone, welcome to CareX webinar on scaling up business in the post-COVID world. And we have a wonderful panel today, not only across different function, different businesses, but also across different geography with Joe from Singapore joining us. So thanks a lot everybody on joining. I'll start with a little bit of introduction for all the panelists here first. And So we have first Rajat. Rajat is a good friend and he's also a managing director in Matrix Partner. Some of his investments, of course, most of you are aware of Razorpay, OneCard, Zip Loan, neobanks like Jupiter, Avail, Ola Financial, Textbook. Rajat is in IIT Delhi Silver medalist and Indian School of Business gold medalist. Thanks, Rajat, for joining us in this webinar.
Thank you, Manish. Great to be here.
We also have Archit. Archit is, of course, most of people who are filing taxes are aware of Archit. He's the founder of ClearTax, and he's the leading fintech startup. He has recently started on the B2B side with the e-invoicing piece, and I think that's a big buzzword going on in Archit's world. Archit is a BTech in computer science from Indian Institute of Technology, Guwahati, and a master degree from University of Wisconsin-Madison. Thanks, Archit, for joining us. We have Avnish from CaratLane. Avnish is, of course, CaratLane. We all know, if we don't know, our mother or our sister or wife has definitely purchased something from CaratLane. So it's neat to know basis. And Avnish is the guy on that. So he's a master degree from IIM Lucknow. He has done multiple different assignments in the past. He started to Code Gladiators in 2014, which has now been recognized as the biggest coding competition in the world by the Guinness Book of Records. And welcome Avnish on the panel.
Happy to be here.
We also have Vikas now. Vikas is a co-founder of 1MG. Again, very neat, like very essential to know 1MG nowadays. I don't know if 1MG is selling remdesivir and other things, but definitely, you should be in a good books of Vikas to get all the medicines. He prior to 1MG, he was part of HealthCart, which is India's largest nutrition e-commerce business. He was also started his entrepreneur journey and with Fresh Daily, and which was India's first e-grocery. Vikas drives all strategic initiative with focus on pharma, insurance, and corporates, and is a bachelor degree in engineering and MBA from KJ Soma Institute of Management. Thanks, Vikas, for being with us.
Thank you.
And last but not the least, Joe. Joe is joining us from Singapore. He is an experienced founder with a history of success in media and technology. He founded earlier Brio.net and as well as many other businesses. He's currently part of the MPL team. Of course, most of the people who are watching IPL has seen MPL ads in terms of, make your own team on MPL. So thanks, Joe, for joining us in this panel. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So guys, we will have a normal format, and then at the end we will have maybe 5 or 10 minutes, depending upon how many questions that we'll get from different people. So before starting and going into the larger part of how to scale up business, just to break the ice and between all the panelists as well as also with the audience here, there's a quick rapid fire round that I'm going to do with each one of you. Let's see how and what comes up. So the first question is for Archit. What's your entrepreneurial superpower, and what is one of the power you wish you had as an entrepreneur?
A product is a superpower. Like, we really focus on creating good products. And what I wish I had, better time management.
Great. So Avnish, you next. What is your measure or definition of success?
At least in India, I think we feel success if we become, hugely profitable, and we also have customers who love us.
Isn't in India, it's success definition of success is how much money you are raising, and in the last 1 month or 2 months time, if Tiger is investing in your company or not.
I know, and I'm sure a lot of people are measuring their success like that. We actually decided to pursue another path, and we are happy with this path.
Sure, sure. Thanks, Anish. Rajat sir, next for you. What is one thing you wish people would talk about less, and what is one thing you wish people spoke more about? And of course, you are listening to so many people in your role.
Talk about less right now. Honestly, COVID. Just every conversation is that. But otherwise, I think it's going back to what Avnish was saying. Talk a little bit less about fundraising and talk a little bit about business building, customer delight, those kind of things.
Absolutely, totally agree with you. Joe, over to you. You are already popular. What is one thing that you want to be known and remembered for?
Ooh, honestly, just being a high integrity human being, I would say, is what I think I would love to be known for. Yeah.
Great, great. Vikas, over to you. If you weren't in your current field, what would your alternate career be, or what you would be doing?
It's a very easy answer for me. I would be a restaurateur. I would be cooking. So that's one hobby, one passion I would love to carve out someday. I call myself weekend chef. If you see my Instagram profile, it's just about food. So had it been in here or sometime in future, you will find me selling desserts or some experiences around food only.
Amazing. I totally agree. Food for me, cooking is such a stress buster. Whenever I'm in a lot of stress, I generally, start cooking something. It's definitely amazing stress buster. So I can totally relate with you. Agree on that.
So Manish and Vikas, once we had some founder had come to pitch to us, and somebody asked them in the pitch meeting, "What's your long-term ambition?" And he said, "मुझे तो हलवाई बनना है."
It's like my wife. Whenever I ask her what you want to do, she said कि मुझे ना एक छोटी सी city में एक छोटा सा दुकान खोलना है. And I asked her what दुकान. She said दर्जी का दुकान.
So Rajat, in case I have to pitch, the brand name is Narayani Halwai. So we've already thought about it. It's my grandmom's name, and there are certain recipes which I would want to pursue. So that is also planned through.
Because then you can just trademark
It
it.
works. We ended up investing in that company, so it works.
Narayani Halwai.
Great, guys. So this was rapid fire is amazing. Thanks a lot on that. So we'll move to more very serious conversation on so we'll start with maybe Archit and Archit, how the business sustained during the pandemic, and possibly the pandemic is still going on in the second wave. So what's one key learning that you had for the pandemic?
Right, Manish. So I think the biggest learning, honestly, in our minds and has been frankly the team and the resilience of the team, investing more time with the team, in the team, like learning from them or executing with them all the way through. Right, like it's been obviously the last 15-30 days have been very tough, but overall during the pandemic also it was incredibly challenging, right? Like the first set of lockdowns led to the business not moving in that zone, and after that, rapid growth in the business. So, just like changing gears so fast, like dealing with so many different moving parts, it's like that was the biggest learning, right? We were all remote. We had a oral culture in terms of we hadn't written down like what are our values, what do we stand for, and what have you, right? Like so, I think just like coordinating and executing and like coming out, I think it's been incredible. So that's like the number one thing for me in the learning aspect for the pandemic.
Great. Amish, I think for you it's sort of because I know that CaratLane has gone into offline stores, and most of the time the stores are closed. So it's for you, it's more like moving from online to offline, and then again getting reliant back to online. So how the business sustained? The same questions over to you, but possibly in a different context.
So I'll tell you that, see, we are in the jewelry business, right? the one you could say good thing or bad thing about our industry was that it's possibly one of the least digitized industries as such, right? Most of the big guys and the millions of small jewelers across the country. So I think in that sense, when the pandemic happened, I think the agility of most of the others to change track and use digital options or online options was fairly limited. So in that sense, it kind of was an advantage for us almost, right? So in that sense, being prepared for a situation like this, because we have been digital from the beginning, and we all already had a fairly omni-channel system in place, whether it was our fulfillment systems or our sales systems, and people were also ready for it, right? It was very easy for us to convert all our store staff into tele sales people, for example. It was very easy for us to move all our fulfillment from Bombay to a distributed model all over the country. So in that sense, I think our business model fundamentally had prepared ourselves to deal with this situation as compared to most of the competition in this space. In addition to that, based on the search data, right, which we were able to see and which we see any which ways, we were able to find enough, I would say, opportunities which were still there. While weddings were not happening, birthdays were still being celebrated, right? So you were able to quickly react to that kind of situation because of how your business and your company was inherently built. And I think that was something which really helped us in the pandemic, so much so that once these stores opened, right, then the recovery rate in the last half of the year was actually better than the original plan for the year. And because of the pandemic, a lot of your other things improved, right? You just became more prudent on certain things, that the financial health actually got much better over the course of the year. And I'm talking of the last pandemic. This time actually it's been much harder, right? Because last time I don't think we were having this kind of problem. So this time we have had to react in slightly different ways. And I think a lot of uh, situations are totally out of control. So we have actually, as a precaution, closed most stores wherever we feel that there is any risk and fulfillment, etc. So I think that right now we are in the middle of it, this time at least. uh, I think in a month from now I'll be able to tell you how we dealt with it.
Got it. Got it. And Rajat, from same question, but basically a completely different perspective here, because you sits in a board of so many companies, you talk to so many companies, you are still evaluating so many companies. This possibly is a time for you to see that which company is more resilient than other companies and possibly bet on that. So how do you think, what's your view on, in terms of let's say from an investor point of view, how do you feel that what are the factors which has affected the business, and people who are coming to you, what are the some of the sustainable matrices that you are right now looking for such businesses?
Yeah, so Manish, I think the question is, or the answer is very different for different types of companies, right? So, like lending businesses, as better than anyone else, right? That they've gone through terrible times over the last 2 years, right? Not just the pandemic, but even before that. So, by definition, what you're looking for in those businesses is just very different, right? Not just the NPA, but the resilience of the founder to actually just pull through. Whereas in general, we are looking for businesses which are much more digital. We also have businesses in our portfolio which also have networks, like what Abneesh was saying, store networks or offline components, and those have clearly been hard over the last year or so, and it's not getting any better. So that's the number one thing that we're looking for. Second, I think is companies that are actually not spending a lot on marketing, right, and are able to figure out some growth hacks, either through some thin edge of the wedge, which allows them to get access to a bunch of customers that they can go after, or some bit of gamification or other ways in which they could drive digital demand for themselves. So I would say, just from across the board, these two would be the most important things that we would look for. From, if I look back at the last year and look at all our portfolio companies, I think, one thing that's truly stood out for me is, companies that have truly done thoughtful hustle. They've out executed all the others, right? Versus those, and then we clearly saw in the beginning of the year, beginning of the pandemic, that there were companies that just took it on, right, and were very quick to react, very quick to form their, you know, all the plans, etc., and quick to pivot in certain areas. Whereas others were, almost like an ostrich head in the sand. Yeah, this too shall pass. In a year, we've seen dramatic difference in performance. So this entrepreneurial hustle and just an ability to react is probably much, much more important than any times that we've ever seen.
Got it. Got it. Vikas, over to you. I mean, I think possibly, one of the better businesses in pandemic is 1mg, and how we have a lot of people has moved in terms of from going into delivery of medicines plus, overall. So what's your reaction? And definitely you will have a more happy story to share here.
I think we were at a spectrum of pandemic where it didn't hit us on the business side, but certainly on a lot of challenges that came from the scale up that has happened. So the good part is without spending on marketing, your demand has gone up and gone up to a significant level where you actually needed to put the pedal on to meet the demand. Now, it had its own operational challenges where local movement, clearing from authority for the movement of goods, there is no clarity on the interstate movement, simple things like packaging material running out. So there were a bunch of challenges which came, but yet at least on the business side, it was on a positive note. I think more than anything, it came as a big responsibility to us. The sector got its own due recognition, and a lot of consumers which were on the fence adopted the service. I think two things which happened on this is one, healthcare was at a brink where adoption was happening for early adopters, but not at the mass scale. From the consumer side, we see a lot of large scale consumer now trying to experiment or give it a try from a service standpoint. And another good thing was happened was not only the pharmacy standpoint, but you saw good uptake of new services like e-consult, which was a niche segment previously or a nascent stage. It took off significantly, 4x, 5x growth. Number of companies which are playing in the segment grew significantly. So that was one aspect on the consumer side. What it also played an important role is bringing the provider side also on this. So the ERP solutions have been there in market for so long, but the doctor adoption has been very limited. You saw a lot of doctors adopting that and coming into the system. Now, this pushes the ecosystem up automatically for everyone. So that initial resistance, so that lag which was there, that has been removed. So what it has done from a health tech perspective is it's preponed the journey by 2 to 3 years from a consumer adoption, from a provider adoption, and whole ecosystem moving forward. I see a lot more innovation coming in, and that's already visible, the kind of space, that traction that is coming. From a pandemic perspective or from what we've seen, I think the scale was significant. A lot more users are coming in and still on a very strong trajectory that we are witnessing. New services are gaining traction. And personally, at an organization level, I think it was big learning that has happened from completely an offline aspect, that managing the office, how quickly we were able to move everything within 7 days to an online environment, and continuity of business remain the most prioritized item. There was a very interesting journey that we saw through. I think the responsibility we shared and the primemost aspect of consumer centricity in all the services that we wanted to deliver helped us, guide us clearly to keep on track and able to achieve what we have done today.
Got it. Great. Joe, your view, same question in terms of how sustainable how the business sustained during the pandemic. Again, I think yours is also one of the happiest stories, at least from the ad that we keep on seeing during the IPL. It seems like a very happy story, but wanted to see inner view from you.
Yeah, well, I mean, the fact is, I think, given what's going on, a lot of people are looking for distractions. People are, I mean, so there's two, I mean, they're really kind of two episodes to this, right? There's the first pandemic of 2020, and then there's episode 2, unfortunately, which is happening now and unfolding now. So I think in 2020, you know, in many ways, and for many industries, not just for us, but for us in particular, at least, it really brought our business, I'd say, a year or two forward. So we essentially scaled the business to where we thought we would be in 2022 back in 2020. So it was, from a business perspective, a phenomenal kind of event for us. Obviously, you know, there were other kind of major challenges with respect to gearing the whole company so that we could function in a remote manner. And that I must admit was incredibly challenging, but it's paying dividends. I mean, we really re-architected the business to function remotely. One of the unique things about MPL is remote's been in our DNA since day one. You know, we launched Indonesia very early, and that Indonesia team was always, you know, operated separately as a different unit. You know, I'm part of the senior management team at MPL, and you know, I haven't seen Sai for almost 18 months, right? So we're able to work really well remotely. And I think that's one of the that has been one of the, you know, happy things, good things for our business, I would say. But yeah, look, I think to answer your question, it was great for the business. We don't really feel good about it. It's not something that we like to shout, you know, from the rooftops or anything, because, you know, there's obviously a terrible human cost, and that's obviously terrible. But frankly, I think people, when, you know, they're at home, they're looking for distractions. They're looking to find things that can occupy their time. They're looking to engage with their friends on games, and that's especially true for sort of the younger demographic, you know, and that which obviously bodes well for India, given the demographic makeup of the nation. So yeah, I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. So Joe, I'm going to again change the question a little bit. So, you know, what we have seen last year and also this year, there's a bigger forecast which is there, that a lot of you know, startups as well as MSME will go out of business. Most of the people has not planned for it, whether it's from a cash flow perspective, whether it's business perspective. One of the questions that people keep on asking is, how can you be ready for such things? How can, you know, let's say first question is, how can you be ready for such thing? And also the follow on would be, you know, even if you're not ready and something hits you, how can you come back immediately and start doing it? So what's your, you know, maybe few pointers on that? What do you suggest to the next gen founders?
Right. So to be clear, the question is, how can you be ready for running out of cash, or what is the question exactly?
I mean, to keep business moving. A lot of businesses is getting shut down. Startups does not have enough cash in their books. So, you know, what do you suggest? Maybe, you know, couple of ideas or couple of suggestions that you have to give to the founders and to promote this, how they can be ready for such eventuality.
Look, I think the first thing is to get kind of independent advice. You know, whether we like to admit it or not, is, you know, as founders or as, you know, as founding teams or whatever, you know, people who, you know, even as employees, frankly, we are emotionally attached to our businesses. You know, I mean, I think as Vikas mentioned, he wanted to be a restaurateur, but, you know, notoriously terrible business model to be in, right? I mean, the survival rates of restaurants, I think, are the worst in the world. And a lot of that is because, you know, the business does well, it takes off, but it's very hard to repeat that success. And the owner ends up plowing all kind of the earnings they've made back into the business, hoping that they can actually make it work. And then they're negative, right? They've now lost money than they've ever made. Whereas kind of the smartest guys, what they do is they take their money, they shut it down, and they start something new. So I think part of it is just frankly getting a set of trusted advisors who can really give you an honest, objective, unemotional look, and taking the hard call. I think, embracing the pain, whether that means, unfortunately laying people off, whether that means, whatever that means, right? Whether that means cutting off certain strategic partnerships or vendor relationships, or you might sort of bear a larger kind of upfront cost. But I do think you need to be confrontational, and what I mean by that is kind of embracing that conflict that's going to happen with that hard decision, right? And having some comfort there, because that is sort of short-term pain, but ultimately does help you survive in the long term. And it's very uncomfortable. I think it's a very hard thing to do, and I think it's really hard to do, especially for founders, because they're so emotionally attached to their business, right? So I think that's just one piece of advice. I think the other thing I would say is to truly focus on transitioning your business to digital, right? I think if there's anything that's true, is that digital businesses in general are a bit more resilient. Not to say that there isn't value in physical. In fact, I think there are some tremendous pockets of value in physical businesses that are never going to go away. But I think those are set up for niche audiences, right? So I think if you're in a business that can leverage digital, I think, I would say really double down and focus on that.
Sure. Achit, your view, what maybe a couple of suggestions that you can give to people to counter any kind of downturns or any kind of these unexpected events that keeps on coming?
So Manish, I think the question is challenging because it depends on the context of the business. So I think for different businesses, I would have vastly different advice, to be honest. But to step back, I think I frankly agree with Joe, in terms of being unemotional, in terms of being very, very objective about the health of the business and facing reality as it is. I think that was very strong advice, very high quality advice, because as human beings and entrepreneurs, founders, or promoters, or people who are running the business, we tend to get very emotional about our businesses, and we generally don't like to face reality as it is, right? So I think that point Joe made is a very powerful one. Other than that, I think few things are very relevant, right? We obviously know that there are choppy waters, troubled waters right now, given lockdowns and a lot of people falling sick within the company, their family members, or on the other side, customers and their family members, or what have you, right? They may not have the mind share, time share, etc., to deliver on the business. Business plans may go awry quite a bit in this stage, right? So I think at this point, planning a very wide buffer of operating errors is essential, right? That is the number one thing as leaders. We should be thinking about how much leeway can we offer. Can we operate with 50% diminished capacity in teams, or can we offer with 2 weeks of complete lockdowns, nationwide lockdowns, or a month of what have you, a key critical team member not being available to come back into work. So I think I would index a lot on operating buffers. That would be my one big advice. The other one is actually, it's kind of obvious, but I think it bears repeating what Rajat also mentioned. The simple aspect of is if your business can leverage digital channels or digital mechanisms, then during this time of lockdown, there is no other way, right? To reach customer access, or creating value for customers, right? So I think any business which is not either evaluating tools or embracing them wholeheartedly or moving in that direction at this point is probably not thinking about the future correctly, in my view. So I think it's a sort of an obvious point. I think all of us are tech entrepreneurs here, so I think it's very illogical for me to make this point. But when I go out in the real world and I see behaviors, people like sometimes try to head in the sand, what Rajat said, or whatever you want to call it. Like people have to like really radically reframe everything about their business at this point. So I think this is a point of like disruption, right? This is a point of change. Like complete behaviors are being reformed, changed. New business models are emerging. People are trying very different things. Like there is a complete change in customer behavior at this point, right? And if businesses are not thinking about that like all the time, like complete change in customer behavior, complete change in customer access, complete change in you can override all incumbents, right? Like you can change everything about your business. You can like really redo your business line, right? Like I think that is a huge opportunity. It comes like generationally once, or once in like 10 years, once in 20 years. Like uh, so I think that cannot be missed, right? Like I think like there's a unique confluence of factors, and all of us are going to be huge beneficiaries of this digital like movement. So I think these two, three things, like one is like just being very objectively real, whether you have like enough cash to make it or whether you have enough. Then the like literally just like creating a safety margin and a buffer and not being delusional. Like people will get sick in this point. And the third one is like embracing digital. I think these would be my three top, like without knowing the business at hand, but I would pick these
Got it.
like three.
Got it. So, Avnish, any counterpoints from your side? Again, I'm coming back to the point because you have the unique thing in terms of you started online, went offline, and now you have to rely back on mostly your online channel. Do you think this, the offline real estate is now a dead weight for you, or is there any change in the strategy you guys are thinking in terms of going back to only online mode? Do you want to counter what Archit and Joe has said that digital is the only way forward?
See, actually, it's not a counter, okay? And I don't think physical is going to die because, in spite of everything, we have seen that physical stores have really helped our business expand, the overall conversion improve, brand loyalty increase, customer retention improve, the whole reverse flow, and especially in the case of jewelry, is a lot easier when you can go and drop it off in a store as compared to getting the courier person to come and pick it up. Right? So there are a lot of advantages. So I don't think we are going to go away from that at all. But like everybody mentioned, right, there are huge opportunities in digital, which were kind of which you could have over indexed in this time, right? So in our case, a lot of things which we used to do, we use this opportunity to cut down on a lot of things. We used to do a lot of BTL activities, a classic retail model, right? Flyer distribution, newspaper ads, and we had a lot of resistance from the retail channels on that. Okay, but uh, like like we said, right, that this is a once in a generation opportunity to change mindsets, and I think that so we were also able to take advantage of it and change the focus of a business in a slightly different way, which would have been very hard otherwise to do. So I think that if you so while there are enough problems when a situation like this happens, there are lots of opportunities. Obviously digital is one, and also to change a lot of other mindsets which otherwise are very very hard to change, right? uh, Obviously you have to be objective. I think that one thing which like I said, it's not counter, is that while everybody becomes very defensive in some sense, and there is a lot of cost focus, right? That let's bring all our costs down. But there is a counter to that, in that there are lots of new opportunities which suddenly become available, right? So for example, while everybody is trying to close stores, suddenly lots of great retail opportunities are available at much lower rentals than what they have always been, right? And I know that it's a little bit of a risk because you are hoping that you will ride over the pandemic and then you will be able to use those great retail locations and grow your business. But as long as you have enough understanding of your balance sheet and you know that there is money and I will be able to tide over it, and as long as you have brought your costs in control to see through the pandemic, those are like, that's one example of a great opportunity which the pandemic presented, right, over and above digital opportunities. So I just feel that in addition to being objective and being digital and being I would say being extra empathetic with people, there is an advantage in actually being, I would say, uh, cautiously aggressive, if there is any word like that, because there are lots of opportunities which present themselves in a time like this, because everybody else, it's like you are zigging a little while everybody is zagging. And if you are, if you have your eyes on the ball, and if you have got good data, you have good understanding of customers, right, what they're actually trying to do, you will find lots of small opportunities. And this is the time to be aggressive about those opportunities and not being defensive about it. And I think that's something which you have seen, and I can see that even now, that enough opportunities present themselves, because most people kind of go into a shell, right, that now is the time to not be aggressive, but it's actually a good time to be aggressive on certain areas.
Absolutely, absolutely. Rajit, I mean, these so-called, events like this time it's pandemic, and these so-called black swan events is now happening more frequently than earlier. So when earlier we used to say a Great Depression, and after that maybe a 30 years gap before a next black swan. Now the black swan, or whether it's induced by nature or whether it's induced internally, it's happening more frequently. Like pandemic, before that, even let's say for India, demonetization was a big black swan event. Now this is happening more frequently because of political, because of natural, because of multiple things. And there was earlier a cost of making your business more sustainable for black swan. Do you think it's still the same? It's still costly to make your business black swan event proof, or do you think that the business needs to now think more specifically towards making them black swan proof?
So, Manish, I don't think you can plan for these things beyond a point, right? And they're black swan for a reason. Um, I think what you can do is solve for it at the core, right? Whether it is the core value prop that you're offering, and make sure the economic architecture of the business is such that when you want it, you can make it self-sustaining, right? Because unfortunately, all startups, the number one thing that we are struggling for is resources, right? Whether it's capital or people or anything else, right? So if something like this happens, can you tweak a few things and become self-sustainable? That to me is perhaps the most important thing that entrepreneurs need to start thinking about. Because tomorrow it could be some other event, right? But that aside, right? I think the other thing is, there's just the kind of people that you hire, right? If you can find people who are extremely resilient, or the culture that you set is entrepreneurial in nature, I think people will deal with problems. Right? Problems will not stop. So to me, those are the two most important things there: the people and the business architecture that you do, and focus on the right value proposition.
Absolutely, totally agree. Because in the art of scaling up, there is generally said that you need to be different from once you are going from 1 to 10, and if you are going from 10 to 100. What is two piece of advice that you should give to anybody who wants to scale from 1 to 10?
See,
So, sorry, uh, I can go first, right? So I think from 1 to 10 to me is still a lot about is the customer value proposition really stacking up, right? Or the so-called PMF, is it there or not? And is that PMF scalable? So you should continue tweaking the product and your go-to-market channels till you truly figure that out, right? Because 0 to 1 to me is just proof of concept, right? That there is someone who likes the product, likes to use it, but are they willing to pay for it? Can you figure out distribution channels that work? So uh, I would advise founders to not try too many other things till they find this PMF scale, right? And from 10 to 100, I think again it is very pertinent to, and again similar to what Avnish was saying. If you've really found something which is working, this is absolutely the time to press the pedal, because market shares don't mean anything in this environment. Most likely your largest competitor is struggling more than you because they have a larger workforce, larger business, bigger problems to deal with. So great time for startups who have something going for them to just accelerate. And I think that's why you're seeing a lot of this funding, etc., also coming, right? Because uh, and you see, right, it's happening mostly in companies that have crossed that PMF stage and are scaling very rapidly now.
True, true. Because same question, two piece of advice for founders who wants to go from 1 to 10, and then two piece of advice if they want to go from 10 to 100.
I think I completely echo what Rajat has said. See, for both, the cycle starts where for a problem statement you have people, then process, and then technology. So basically, you start solving by throwing people at it. Once you reach certain scale, when you have better understanding of what's happening, you try to define a process. Once you have absolute clarity on the process, you bring technology and bring optimization. So that's your journey from 1 to 100, and with milestones, whatever you want to define. See, 1 to 10, the most important part to solve is your product market fit. The sooner at the initial part you are able to identify what is your product market fit, and able to experiment, able to quickly fail, learn, and improvise on what is going to be your exact offering, which the consumer is going to love, is what the journey 1 to 10 about. Once you have solved for that, be it any situation, scaling up becomes easier. You don't have to worry because your model is tuned. You know each dollar invested is going to what give you how much return exactly, and then you know where to cut, where to improvise, where to scale. Now that's the most important part. So I don't have specifics on both, but this is what I would follow if I have to invest more in identifying what is your product market fit, what is and why the consumer is going to love you, why your product is there out in the market, and why somebody is going to pay for you or service or the offering that you're bringing. Once that is identified clearly in 1 to 10, rest is all about scale up, which obviously will be a reflection of the culture that you've built, the leadership you define, and the clarity with which you approach.
Got it. Definitely. Achit, in your case, you have a B2C model, you also have a B2B model. Does the advice changes for the B2C and B2B, and these are two different giants altogether? So what's your advice to people?
Right. So Manish, I think like on the B2C side, right, like, and we have a completely digital presence, and I think there's no better time to scale, right? Like the customers are available online. They are a lot more online just because they're not commuting to work. Like they are, depending on your target audience, they're not even commuting to work. They have a lot of time between like various activities, and even when they want leisure or they want to go out, like I'm sure like with the rise of MPL and many other companies, like the leisure activities are also happening. People are probably trading a lot more than they should or need to. I'm just making a joke here, but the part is like I think on the B2C side, right, like from a digital and the COVID scenario perspective, it's a fantastic time to keep doubling down on the core of the business, right? Sharpening the product value to the customer, which both Rajat and Vikas talked about, and like the second part is like uh, finding more and more channels to amplify, given everybody's online, perhaps using social media more intelligently, influencers more intelligently, and what have you. And if you have the capital, then like mass media more effectively, right? So I think like on the consumer side, like if the product market fit is very clear, then like I think scale up is far more likely in this area. I think on the business side, things have been different, right? Like businesses are like depends on who you are serving, right? Like if you're serving businesses, like for example, which are trying to go digital or adopting digital tools, now then you are in the picks and access business, shovels business, like pickaxes and shovels business during a rush, right? There's a rush towards going digital. Other than that, like businesses were facing a tough time during this financial year, right? Like at least during lockdowns, and like uh, budgets were slashed and people were very cautious, right? During this time, like doing business in India was something where people had to really navigate until optimism returned, which was the case at the end of October, November. After that, like business scenario changed. So I think like you have to navigate very carefully, and I think the scenario will keep evolving. Right, on the consumer side, I think people are adopting digital in massive hordes. The consumer is a very very different story, and on the business side, like if you are in the if you are in some tailwinds which you have positioned yourself, then it's a very different thing. If you are serving businesses where there is no specific tailwinds driven by this macro environment, then you have to position a business very, very differently. Perhaps it's a good time to sharpen the product, articulate more value, go deeper, and improve the product, create more like depth, service the same customers better, try to extract more revenue per customer. So I think like it'll depend on which kind of sector you are operating in. There are certain sectors which like obviously compressed, let's say travel or what have you. And if you were serving one of those sectors, or if you were operating in one of those sectors, life would be very, very different, right? Like, so I think the answer is very subjective. And also on the consumer side, also the subjectivity revolves around if you're in a sector which the pandemic shuts down or compresses dramatically. So I think it's contextual. In our case, like in the financial services fintech space, like I think on the consumer side, businesses continue to adopt. On the business side also, right, like the B2B side of things, there is tailwinds due to digitization force, right? Like, and that continues to drive people to adopt technology, which we are providing. So I think we were fortunate. I think like I've seen other entrepreneurs and businesses which had far more challenges, and businesses which were OPEX heavy had to think a lot around their debt and around their financial position. So I think stepping back, like I think my broad advice is again very simple. Like if you have the cash, like then optimize on the deepest value you can create at this time. I mean, if customers are available for cheap, acquire them. If you have very sharp product market fit, if you don't have it, like make it happen. If you need to pivot. I mean, do what is necessary at this time.
All right. Got it. Joe, slightly different questions to you. Since MPL has gone not from 1 to 10 and 10 to 100, but directly from 1 to maybe 500. What's two piece of advice if somebody says that, hey, I don't want to go to 1 to 10 and then 10 to 100, I just want to go 1 to 500. How can somebody go 1 to 500? Like a rocket ship?
Honestly, you just got to get really lucky. Look, I think, I think if you just take if you just like zoom all the way out and you think about, animals just in an ecosystem and why how they evolve and how some become, top of the food chain and others don't. A lot of it is just shaped by, the context, right? The environmental context, and certain things can happen, like your the landmass you're on just like splits off from another landmass, and so you go off and you're able to evolve without any predators, things like that, right? So there are a lot of things outside of your control. I would say if we launched MPL today, I don't think we'd be as successful, and I don't think if we launched MPL, 3, 4, 5, say, back in 2015 or 2016, I'm not sure if we would have been successful either. So I think the way I like to think about it is just like surfing. You can control how good of a surfer you are, but entrepreneurs love to say that they're the ones who generated the wave, and they really didn't. I think every entrepreneur knows that. Ultimately, the wave comes, and it's your job as an entrepreneur to ride it. And write it really, really well. And I think that's what we've done. So what I would say is, and a lot of that involves courage, right? So going back to product market fit, I would just say, when you have it, be willing to quadruple down on it. And I would say that's what we've done really well, right? I think we had product market fit, and we bet the house. And product market fit, one of those things, it's one of those things, it's such a, it's not a perpetual state, right? There's this myth that you hit product market fit and forever now you have product market fit. You go through different phases of product market fit. So I would say once you have that, really, really double down. And what that does is it basically, sometimes it creates this reflexivity, right? Where you're able to achieve so much momentum that it changes everything about how your employees behave, how the market views you. And that opens up new opportunities that kind of lead you to a next level of product market fit. But I think that involves a lot of courage and a very high risk appetite, and a person who wants to build a certain kind of business, right? I'm not sure it's not for everybody. I think there are many different flavors of entrepreneur, and they all can coexist and live fine together. But I think in our case, it was really just consistently betting the house on areas where we had very, very high conviction, and we were able to execute very, very quickly and drive great results. But also, just tremendous amounts of luck. I mean, COVID, I think, was a huge boon for our business when we launched. Also, I mean, suddenly everybody in India had 4G internet, right? I think that's a huge boon for us. So that's what I'd say. Just courage and really tripling down on when you have that when you have that fit.
Yeah, luck favors the brave. Anyway. So just one thing to all the attendees. If you guys have any questions, please write it down so that we can take it at the end of this panel. So this is great, guys. This is what all of you guys has said is amazing. I'm now going to move to more lighter part of it. We'll ask some more lighter questions. So Avnish, one questions to you: dead or alive, who would be your ultimate dinner party guest and why?
Ultimate dinner party guest? Sorry?
Ultimate party guest, dead or alive, doesn't matter. Who do you want to be your ultimate party guest?
Okay, I actually would like to spend time with Malcolm Gladwell because I think he just makes great conversations, and if I can get a chance to just hang out with him and talk, right from sports to maths to the new book which he's written about World War II to every other topic under the sun, right? Whether drugs are right or wrong for athletics, and there is like a 5,000 topics which he can talk about at great depth with great interest. Then I would want to do that.
Great. Vikas, same question. Who will be your ultimate party guest? Please say it's me, because I love to get your food. I am assuming that you will be cooking in your dinner party.
So there are two answers to it. So my daughter's favorite singer today is Blackpink from Korea. So I don't know. There are a couple of songs, during the day when I go out of this room, the songs are playing. I would love to have my daughter and then Blackpink singing some rocking songs to party. That would be one. On other note, I don't know about party, but would love to have time with Sachin Tendulkar if it can be. Boy, I would love to have some time. I don't know. I will be partying. I'm not sure about him, but I would love to spend that time and just talk to him.
Sure, great. Joe, same question to you.
Dead or alive, I think I think someone like like a Frank Sinatra, I think would be really, really cool. Just he seems to have lived a really colorful life, and I feel like he just would have the best stories. So yeah, I think that's probably my answer.
Great. Achit, for you, another question. What is one secret about you which nobody knows? Like you own a Ferrari, which we are not aware of, or a private jet.
That's a tough one. Let me think about it for a few seconds. You ask another panelist on the same question. Give me a second.
Same question to you.
Yeah, problem here. Archit and I are very close friends.
Yeah. So I can't think of anything which Rajat doesn't know.
Looks like आप दोनों ये सोच रहे हो कि क्या बताऊं कहीं दूसरे वाले को बुरा ना लग जाए.
नहीं उसको सब पता होगा. उसके साथ ही क्या होगा जो भी.
You can tell each other's secret.
I lead a very boring life, yaar. Nothing to declare.
I'll just tell one. It was a very brief one. There was a time back in the day, maybe 10, 15 years ago, I used to collect knives of different shapes and sizes. So it was a very
knives. You mean
very big hobby? No, not the cooking knives. Really like. I actually had a Rampuri also at one time. So a very, very weird hobby.
This is really nice. Archit, your turn. You have to say something.
I think I lead a very boring life. I'm sure like half the things I don't know what to. I think I live like an open book. Kuch bhi मेरी family को सब पता होगा. I can't come up with anything right now. I'll think for a minute. You ask the other panelist, man.
Okay, no worry. We'll move to Q&A. There are a few questions that I have received. One question for Rajat. From the perspective of venture investment, post-pandemic, will organization industry which have the ability to operate remotely get valued higher compared to organization industry which cannot operate remotely?
Sorry, my question is just can you
I
repeat?
think to rephrase, it's basically if a company has the ability to go digital versus a company who is more like cannot go digital, they don't have option to go digital, which one will get valued more?
Yeah, clearly the digital one, man.
Got it. And is this the reason we are seeing so many unicorns coming up?
Yeah, no. So, so look, part of it is just there's too much money also. But for most of them, actually, the fundamental businesses have just improved and grown so fast. It's they've accelerated. Some of them may be early, but it's all pointing in the right direction.
Sure, sure. Another question is for Vikas. As their lockdowns and medicines might be difficult to reach to villages, how do you think you can able to serve them?
See, as long as the shipment and the courier companies are functioning, and barring few states where there are complete lockdowns, we are able to service most of the areas. So the situation is very fluid and it keeps changing. At least in most parts, the interstate movement is allowed, and it being part under essential services, we are able to service. Yes, there is a huge stress on the supply chain itself, but we are doing our best, whatever we can, to make sure that medicine supply doesn't get disrupted for the individuals.
Got it. Got it. Other question for maybe Joe can take it. How to keep people motivated and ensure high productivity when working remotely? And I know you have team across countries.
I think it's, a lot of it is just trust. I think it's just, most of it is trust and saying, when somebody, trusting that people are doing their work, trusting that, they're, that people are not slacking off, trusting, not needing to sort of dive in and try and micromanage. I think what I've seen is there's often a tendency to kind of people to very, very aggressively chase after things because they don't think, they don't think people are working. But I think just trust your employees is a really big one. And then I think the other part is, pick up the phone. I don't know about other folks here, but I write in a way that for many people it comes across as extremely rude because I'm very, very, very direct when I write things, and people feel like I'm being very standoffish. So I'm always very sensitive to pick up the phone and talk to them so that my whole affect can come across. So it's clear that when I say, hey, where's the work? When you say something and you type it, I'm just saying, hey, where's the work? How's it going? They're hearing me yell at them and say, hey, where's the work? Right. So it's very important for me to pick up the phone and explain that, hey, just checking in. I think that's, yeah. Trust people, give them the benefit of the doubt, and pick up the phone. I would say are the best pieces of advice.
Got it. One question, another question is, and maybe Avnish, you can answer this. Is this time is good to start a new business?
It depends on what business you're starting, right? Because of the pandemic, there are lots of, I would say, new problems or new opportunities which have come up, right? Or new ways of doing the same thing as compared to how it was being done earlier. If you have a great idea, and like we said earlier, right, that some fundamental rules of business don't change, right? So if you have a great solution for a good problem and you can solve it consistently, then yes. If not, then it's never a good time to start a business.
Got it. Got it. Ajit, one question that has come specifically for you. Nowadays, every time, with vaccination rolling out and government rolling out so many things, there's a lot of people are talking about taxpayer money. One question that has come is, do you think that a lot of people will start asking more transparency on if I'm paying taxes, where is this money going? And do you think ClearTax can provide, some kind of a transparency, maybe have finance minister in your board to give those transparency, but something, I don't know. are you guys thinking around it? What are your views on this?
Yeah, I think like because of the pandemic, right? Like in the massive shortage of like amenities, like there's a lot of uh, pain, right? And that pain gets expressed in the citizenry asking questions to its governing bodies, right? Uh, I think, I think, I mean, to a degree, the budget obviously every year talks about where the money is going, right? Like that's the standard annual exercise, and actually, ClearTax we do a lot of work explaining the budget to the layman. I mean, but like fundamentally, that is the national exercise in telling you where the money is going. Now, whether the money gets deployed correctly or not, and how well it get deployed, I think those are areas which I think there are obviously gaps. But like I think the macro trend of India digitization is that like we are putting more and more of this data online, right? Slowly, steadily, in certain cases, much more transparently. So I think I mean, what India collects in taxes is like very well understood. I mean, it's all published every month, every year. What it spends, I mean, obviously we run a deficit, right, as a country. So I think like I think what people are asking for is good governance, right? They're not asking for like where is the taxpayer money going, because we are actually spending more than what we collect in tax. Uh, I think I think like there is a lot more we like the government can do, and we as citizens can ask. Like I think the Nordic countries do it very well. They publish exactly like a public market company would. Like what are the cost heads? Where is the money going? There's an annual report, quarterly reports. Like I think the running the government like a business in terms of like at least transparency and publishing where the money is going and the outcomes would be of value. I think a lot of smart people who are in policy advocacy have thought about this problem than me, but like so I'm not the right like sort of person to answer this question, but I've seen like how other countries have done it, which have done it better. They're smaller countries though, and like I think the other part is which I've been thinking about in this pandemic has been the decentralized and local councils and local city governments or local state local municipalities or what have you are are they empowered enough? Are they taking enough actions and what have you? So I think those kind of questions occur to me far more than the taxpayer money going into. I think the budget talks about what heads the taxpayer money goes into. I think that's actually the funny part. Like money gets allocated, it doesn't get spent also a lot of times. So I think there's a lot of policy challenges. I think it's a very loaded question. It's hard to answer. So.
Thanks a lot, Ajay. Thanks, everyone. This is really a great, discussion. Really appreciate. I learned a lot from it. Definitely going to use some of the, learnings that you guys have shared with me. I'm hoping that definitely a lot of people who are attending it, a lot of them are startup founders. A lot of them are MSME promoters who are going to utilize this. We keep on telling people, go digital, go digital. That's possibly the way out. And hopefully this panel discussion is going to help people in going digital. Thanks a lot to all of you. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Rajat. Thanks, Avnish. Thanks, Vikas. Thanks, Archit. This is really, really great. Thanks a lot. Be safe.